G'day, Professor Joseph Drew. There's a lot of confusion about exactly what we're trying to do with a local government tax. In fact, it's the most moral of all the taxes we have in Australia. In this video, I'll outline and tease apart the two competing ideas of capacity to pay and distributive equity. So in New South Wales and lots of other states, we have unimproved land value as the basis of our local government tax system. At the end of this video, I'll talk about capital improved value, which they have in Victoria and some states, and some people want it in New South Wales, and there's really good reasons not to do that. Let's first talk about unimproved land tax. The idea goes back to Henry George. He actually came out to Australia in the late 1800s. He was married to an Australian lady, Matilda, and had a big interest in it. He was a natural law philosopher, and he said that if we wanted a moral tax, a tax that didn't distort people's decision making, a tax that stopped people sitting on land and not doing anything productive with it, a tax that didn't punish people for working harder, well then the unimproved tax was the way to go. And he pointed out quite rightly, you buy a block of land, you do nothing, and it will go up in value. Why? Because of population growth, immigration, maybe new roads, maybe a new rail centre, maybe a new industry. Now, if your land's gone up in value, the unimproved value of your land's gone up in value, it's because of things other people have done. Why should you keep that unearned wealth? And that's the basic idea that forms the foundation of an unimproved land tax. And when you think about it, it's a much more moral tax than income tax, where the harder I work, the more you tax me. It discourages people from working hard. It's a much more moral tax than GST, which hits the poor family harder than more wealthy Australians, because poorer Australians have to spend a larger proportion of their budget on groceries and necessities, many of which attract a GST. It's a much more moral tax than the 50 cents a litre we pay on our fuel, when people stuck out in the bush don't really have much choice other than to buy fuel. It's not like we can use public transport. So there's a lot of advantage of an unimproved land tax over other systems. So there's two separate components that are working here, and people often confuse the two and conflate the two. Our regulators, our ministers, are constantly confusing and conflating the two things. So there's distributive equity happening here, and this is how we apportion the burden on the basis of your unimproved land value. And the idea is to capture that unearned wealth. And typically your rates are a tiny fraction of the increase in the value of your land from valuation to valuation. We're just asking for a tiny fraction back. And the principle, you may not agree with it. If you're sitting on a lot of land, you probably don't. But the principle is your land value went up by tens of thousands of dollars because of things other people did, because of roads, immigration, population growth, new industries, whatever. We'd like a fraction of that tens of thousands of dollars your land value went up by, that new wealth that you did nothing to earn. We'd like a fraction of that back that we can plow into infrastructure and assets, which will actually create more wealth for you. So that's why we apportion the rate burden for the whole community on the basis of land value. Now, we don't quite do it right in New South Wales. What we should be doing is looking at the increase in your land value and apportioning it that way, and reporting to you on what proportion of the increase of land value your rates represent. But it's much better than capital improved value, which I'll talk about in the last slide. So the idea of an unimproved land tax is to get back some of that unearned wealth. And that's not a bad idea, really. If you've done nothing to earn the money, I've done nothing to earn the money, my land value's gone up considerably since I bought it, why shouldn't I hand a little bit back to the community so they can provide basic goods and services, which will actually help my land go up by even more, and I'll make more money out of it. That's the basic idea, and it's hard to argue against it, certainly when you compare it to other taxes. Stamp duty is another example of a really bad, immoral tax. But the problem is you don't pay your tax out of your land. You don't dig a dirty, great big hole, fill up a wheelbarrow with dirt and turn up to the council officers to pay your rates bill with part of your land. And this is where people get confused. The capacity to pay is a function of your income. You pay your rates out of your income. So when we're looking at capacity to pay, we need to look at incomes. Now, most states don't. New South Wales government is insisting that people should compare average rates as if it means something. It's meaningless. I've got videos about this. You know the averages are skewed, and if the average rates in different local government areas occur in correlation with different levels of incomes and wealth, it's meaningless to compare them in the first place. So you need to look at the incomes. What proportion of your income do you pay out in rates? And most of you, if you do the calculation, you'll be surprised. It's much less than 1%. It's single digits, which pales into insignificance compared to my income tax, which is like 45%, and my GST, that's like 10%. The percentage of my income that goes to local government taxes, for me personally, is less than 0.5%. And when I think about it, what do I actually use? What do I actually have in Moonbi? Only local government goods and services. So bang for the buck, local government beats anything. Now, there's a lot of uninformed commentary about changing to capital improved value in New South Wales and other states. CIV, it's abbreviated as. And what you're doing there is you're not taxing the unimproved land value anymore. You're taxing the land value with the improvements on top of it. So all of a sudden you've lost that moral foundation that Henry George advocated for, which is that we only tax unearned wealth. Because if you're taxing the capital improved value, you're also taxing my efforts, whether I built a house or a shed, water pumping, improve the land, fencing, all those things. And that's going to discourage people from making their land as productive as possible. Now, in a city situation, CIV's it's not a good idea, but it's not horrible. In a rural situation, it imperils the economy of this nation, and it imperils our food security. Because if you're going to strictly employ CIV, you're going to tell farmers, if you build sheds and infrastructure, feedlots, pumping stations, you improve your land, you improve your fencing, we're going to tax all that. So they're not going to invest into making their land more productive, which means they'll produce less, which makes us all worse off. It's a really bad idea. It's going to be incredibly difficult to administer in rural areas if you're going to do it properly, to work out who's got bores and who's put irrigation in and who's improved the fences and all those sorts of things. If you're not going to do it properly, you're not really doing CIV at all. So think again about CIV, particularly if you're in a rural area. If you're a farmer, you should be really worried about this thought bubble. If you're anyone that cares about having a moral tax system, you should be really worried about this thought bubble. If you're anyone that cares about having a transparent tax system, you should be really worried about this also. Look, I hope this video has clarified the two things that are working in our local government tax system and the potential problems, some of them, I only listed a few, of going to a CIV system. I'm not saying we are going to, but it has been recommended by regulators in the past, and it is a likely outcome of the current inquiries that we're having, and that would be a really big problem moving forward. Thank you very much for your time. Goodbye.